You can actually pack up everything except something to write with and a piece of paper if you'd like to take notes as we visit with Jake Gallen this morning.
Hello.
As you know, we're going to start with Jake's visit. We'll run till about 10:30, we'll take a break, and then we'll come back and we'll finish our networks content from last week. We're going to do a fun exercise to help you think more about perhaps some changes to your network structure. And I'm going to lend you all some of my relational capital. So I'll ask for a few volunteers to talk with me, and you'll see soon enough what that looks like. I want to welcome Jake Gallen to class today. This is his 4th visit we were talking about.
Yeah.
We met through Jenna Heath, who some of you may know works in the College of Liberal Arts. We did a podcast together, which you hopefully listened to in preparation for today's class. That was in April of 2021.
Yes.
Yeah, time has flown. And we've kept in touch since then. Jake has been gracious enough to share his time with us this morning. As you know, we're going to talk today about power dynamics on the Strip from this perspective of resources, namely money, and then by extension, power. At any point, if you have questions or you would like to talk with Jake, please feel free to raise your hand and introduce yourself. He's really here to have a conversation with all of us. He's going to share with us about his experiences, including opening Omnia, if I'm remembering correctly. And we're going to touch on the article that you read as well about the secret economics of a VIP party, one of my favorite articles. Jake is an alumnus of UNLV, so he's back at home with us today. He was a very involved member of the campus community, as you'll hear throughout his visit. Please join me in welcoming him to our power class. And I'll actually take this off. Thank you again for being here today. It's always good to have you back, and I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's crazy that it's the 4th time already.
Yes.
On that podcast. So my name is Jake Gallen. I was on campus here from 2010 to 2015 from Las Vegas. I've done a bunch of things since then, but over my time, is there anybody here who was born and raised in Las Vegas? So there's a few of you. So those that are born and raised in Las Vegas, you're kind of, you become desensitized to gambling, sexuality, power. It just becomes something that's kind of just baked into the lifestyle here. So from 18 to 26, I was worked on the Las Vegas Strip, 5 years at the Planet Hollywood Pool, and then 5 years at Omnia nightclub. Has anyone here been to Omnia nightclubs? Is there anyone here who's 21? As you know, this place is pretty crazy. It looks like a freaking spaceship. Over $100 million went into building that nightclub, as well as since then, there's been multiple clubs that have also kind of followed similar suit. I was what's called a model beverage runner at the nightclub, which is just basically a fancy term of saying a busser. But in the nightclubs, they put model before everything so that it gives them the opportunity to fire you at discretion based off of your look. Even as a union employee. And in the union here, they protect you from a lot of things, but if you have that model in front of you, then they can fire you based off of how you were hired. So basically, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit, for the men and women, if you were 5 pounds lighter or heavier than the time that you were hired, that gave them the ability to put you on they put you on a like a training program where you had to basically get back into that hired shape, which was pretty interesting. So I was there up until the pandemic, and then I kind of went on to my own thing. But while you're there, you realize how money, power, and also partying just really like shapes our reality. So it's just a very, very, very interesting time. And a term you'll hear a lot is called the golden handcuffs, which is a common term in the industry where most people actually hate working in the industry. You develop a lot of terrible habits from insomnia to spending to provocative behavior, even going to jail and getting in criminal trouble. But everyone stays because you make so much money that there's no reason to ever leave, because you probably won't find a better return on less expenditure of effort and time while working there.
What led to your decision to leave ultimately at the age of 27?
Yeah, 25.
25.
I left mostly, I realized pretty quickly when I was in your guys' seats, I always wanted to work at a nightclub. I always thought like, oh, it'd be so cool. You know, you can make all this money. I could go to school. I don't have to worry about anything. And then I quickly realized how terrible it was for your health. So after about 2 years at Omnia, which was there for 5 years, I realized that everyone was just insufferable and very miserable. And yes, you're making a lot of money, but for me, it just really didn't fit my lifestyle. I was somebody who wanted to go be an entrepreneur. I wanted to go like pursue different things. I had a few different businesses while I was at the club, started a podcast, which kind of helped me get out of there. But ultimately, even when I quit, when they called me back after the pandemic, I was only one of 70 bussers that decided not to come back. So I was literally all by myself. And I even felt guilty leaving, because you're leaving like such a good job. For men, it was one of the best jobs in the city. But I just knew that I wanted to do something different, and I go back every once in a while, and it's still the same people there almost 10 years later.
Wow. I remember the first time we talked about the Strip, the phrase golden handcuffs really stayed with me. And one question I have for you is, how aware or woke do you think people are on the Strip of the conditions that they're living in? In other words, do they know how unhealthy it is and they choose to stay, or do they not know how unhealthy it is?
I would say the majority of people are very aware of the terminology of golden handcuffs and how terrible it is for your health. Everyone's sleeping 4 or 5 hours a night because of insomnia, and you have to set up different ways to kind of trick yourself to go to bed. So I think that's probably one of the number one causes. And then number two is just going out and drinking after work. People get off at 5, 6 o'clock in the morning, and then you go to like Steiner's or Tommy Rocker's or some of these other industry bars, and you go out and drink with your coworkers, whether you want to settle down or you just want to continue the partying, because maybe you're not supposed to drink at work, but a lot of people do. You have people who are throwing thousands of dollars at you, so you don't want to kind of disgrace them and not drink with them. So some people drink or party under the rug kind of thing, and then you go out with your clients afterwards. Next thing you know, it's 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and then you have to go to bed and get ready for work the next day. So those are probably the two worst health effects, but you see, it's very obvious when you kind of like step back and look. You see all the managers are balding by 30, all of the women there are getting plastic surgery for their face by 25, by the late 20s. All the men there are having issues having kids. There's just like a lot of health defects that pop up and surface, but people kind of look past it because of the money you're making.
Let's talk about the hierarchy within a nightclub. For students who may not know, can you walk us through the different positions that people occupy? Yeah,
we can start with the bottom. So at a nightclub you have, if you go through the whole thing, you have security. It's kind of the lowest rung, even though they protect you. But then even with security, you have a hierarchy. You have security guards and you have security specialists. Security specialists are the ones that literally stay specifically to just certain tables that are coming in, so tables that are generally spending $10,000 or more on a night. They get their own security specialist. The security specialist walks into the bathroom, gives them or helps them with like whatever needs that they need. And then from a service perspective, you have porters, which are the ones who are sweeping the trash, cleaning up the puke, or any sort of like biohazard. They're kind of like the ones that are right underneath bussers, which is what I was, model beverage runner. The titles kind of change depending on the clubs or pools that you're at. They just kind of try to hide it that way. So the bussers and cocktail servers, or bottle girls is what they like to be called. Those are the two people you get at table service. So the bussers are kind of like, we used to call ourselves like the WD-40 to the nightclub or to the table service, right? We're the ones that are changing the ice, the juice. We're kind of like attending to whatever the server needs, or the guest. If a guest is getting chaotic, you're the one that has to go report it to the security, or whatever random requests that they might need, cigarettes or getting girls to the table, which is a whole nother conversation, because technically this happens consistently at the nightclub that guys will be like, hey, can you get me girls to the table, right? They'll give you $100 per girl. But technically it's illegal, because if the girls or the women that you bring to the table are prostitutes, then you're courting prostitutes to the table, which is highly illegal. So you have to be very, very careful to it. Never stops anybody from doing it. There's always ways around it in the presentation. And then the women are basically, they're just salespeople, glorified salespeople. If you're selling bottles of alcohol from a $2,000 markup to a $10,000 markup. The cheapest bottle at a club is usually about $600, and you could get all the way up, and that's for like a Grey Goose bottle, right? So you could get a Grey Goose bottle at the store for about $30. You go sell it for $600 plus tax, tip, and gratuity and everything. All the way upwards to, I think the most expensive bottle was a 30-liter of champagne, which I believe is about 100 grand, which people buy every once in a while. And so then after that, then you have the managers, right? And then those are just like ops managers. They're your day-to-day managers that have operations. They help with the tables. They mostly assist with complaints and then managing the staff. And then above that, and this is highly debatable, but above that, most people are aware of from a power perspective, is the host, the VIP hosts. They're the ones that book the tables, they're the ones that bring in the whales. So they're the first point of contact for any high spender that comes in and wants to book a table, and they have the discretion, full discretion. The managers kind of set the price of like what the minimums are for the night, but the hosts are the ones that really have the full discretion of how much the guest and their party is going to pay. And a table can go anywhere from $1,000 upwards to, I've seen over $1 million spent before. So they're the ones that really have the power because they're the one that's putting the money in everybody's pocket at the end of the day.
Wow. And for the students' context, what is the sort of work hours across the year for a woman who might be a cocktail server? So in other words, they work seasonally, correct?
It depends. So if you're at the pool, then you're generally beginning of March to the end of October. I think pool season ends for the day clubs about in a few weeks. If you're a nightclub worker, then it's year-round. Some people prefer nightclubs because they're generally union, so it's more security, but between those who work at day clubs and nightclubs, you make about the same over the course of the year. Pool's more condensed, so you're making more per day.
Yep.
But you don't have the security because you have to go do auditions every year. And I don't know if you've seen it, auditions are now starting to be this like social media, the social media frenzy. When I applied at Omnia, there was 5,000 servers and 2,000 bussers that applied for 70 positions each. So I think now the pool auditions are getting to be even more than that. They've now stretched it to almost 3 weeks long, and they set it up with just like a club now. You have like VIP who are returning girls who get to cut the line, but then other girls come in and they have to wait sometimes days to just apply, and it's just like a standard model shoot. Everyone shows up in their bikini, or excuse me, or the guys are in board shorts, and you go into a room, you stand on an X with lights, and there's people there, and you just ask about the modeling.
All right, so I have a few questions for all of you. How many of you, by a show of hands, have been to a day club here in town? How about a nightclub? Okay, I want you to turn to your partner and come up with a figure in terms of the annual salary that you think a cocktail server makes at her job in a nightclub. See if you can come up with a number after talking about it with your partner. All right. And you're welcome to shout out, what is the annual salary of a cocktail server in a nightclub on the Strip?
We said 80 to 100K, depending.
80 to 100,000?
100,000.
100, 150 in the back?
120K.
120?
Depending on your position.
Okay. Does anyone think it's lower or higher than this six-figure range? Yes.
I think people will claim it's higher, but I don't think that they know. Because
Okay.
they get cash and they blow it, and they just assume I make $500 a night. I work 3 nights, and they do some like napkin math, and they say I make $300,000 a year.
Yeah, napkin math. I like it. So it might be hard to track, right? Especially if it's cash. Other thoughts? How much are these women making?
I think it would be too based on the club they're working in.
Okay.
Clientele and in the environment, because interesting enough, I would like to know what happened during COVID to the service industry. Did the tips stay the same, or did they get smaller?
Yeah, so tips actually got better after COVID. Also, there was a consolidation at Power. A lot of the smaller clubs actually closed down due to COVID. So the mega clubs ended up getting more customers over time. So from what I've heard, the tips have vastly improved to the point where, it's probably over 100,000 for most people, because now there is just a shortage of clubs. And you have Zook, XS, Omnia, Hakkasan, and Marquee. Those are like the only real 5 major clubs, and I think everyone's tips have improved.
Wow. So the answer is, what does a cocktail server make in a nightclub?
Yeah, it's probably about 100 to 150 in club, yeah. And so with the way that tipping works for women, most of that is actually on paper. They're able to track. For the guys, whether you're a security guard or a busser, it's a little bit harder to track because the money that a guest directly hands a busser, security guard, goes unreported because they get to keep it themselves.
Got it.
So some bussers actually make more than the servers do.
Yes.
Depending on where your section is. And that's where some of the hierarchy comes from.
I'm always struck when we talk that on the one hand, there's this intoxicating lifestyle of money, you're around wealthy people, it looks glamorous, there's a lot of social media activity for these women in particular. And then on the flip side, there's a clear tax that they pay for the lifestyle and that they feel trapped in it in a way. In your opinion, what made you have different goals than being on the Strip? Like, where did your goals come from?
Yeah, for me, a little bit more personal. Just grew up on the east side of Vegas, so I didn't come from like a wealthy family, so I kind of looked at life a little bit differently. But while I was working there, I realized that again, you get to have intimate relationships, not sexually, but for the night, you get to sit and talk with a billionaire, right, or a famous person who's sitting across from you. You're basically cutting out all those gatekeepers. You're cutting out their handler or their everyday receptionist or their security people, and you begin to dive a little bit deeper into these like successful people's minds and run how they operate. And a lot of them actually offer advice because you're offering a service to them. Most of these people that are spending a lot of money, they're in a vulnerable state. They're here because they just want to hang out and have fun. And they're a little bit more prone to helping you and offering advice. So you get a lot of their phone numbers, you get to text them, and they kind of hook you up with different opportunities. And to me, that seemed like a loophole and an opportunity that not many people get to pursue. So that was something that I always wanted to do. But for me, ultimately, it just came down to health decisions. I just saw so many of my friends losing their lives while working at the club. We had a handful of people who OD'd or liver cirrhosis or just getting it into criminal behavior from just being there so long. And it was a tough decision at the time. As I said, I was the only busser who left at the time. And it didn't seem like a job that had any sort of longevity. By the time you're 40 or 35 or 40, if you're a service worker, that's usually the time that you time out, and not many others found any sort of success afterwards. You just go get a service job in a less pristine position. So if you're a server who's like in your 40s, then you go get a serving job on the casino floor somewhere, which is probably about half the pay. So it seemed like that was kind of the top of the pinnacle of their life, and that's not something that I wanted.
Yes, that makes sense. To bring to life for the students some of the folks that come and pay hundreds of thousands of dollars or more, can you share with us some of your favorite stories about guests and who these men in particular were and what they wanted?
Yeah, I mean, you get famous people. I've had like Reggie Bush and Chris Evans and Dan Blazarian and Billy. We've had Jeff Bezos come in and the Trump family. You never really know who's going to come in. I was more caught off guard by the amount of wealth of people who are kind of just like kept secret. These these people who own concrete companies who are worth $500 million, or these people who create these like very niche tech companies that come in and spend $500,000 or $50,000. That's what really caught my eye, and the kind of like the priority that they set on partying. Like these guys. It's mostly men. I say guys just not from a sexist state, but I'd say 99 out of 100 tables that you get is a man paying for the table. So they're mostly coming in here because they're either looking to let loose for some sort of reason, something that they're missing in life. They're trying to entertain clients that are probably more wealthy than them to land a deal, or they're trying to look for somebody to hook up with at the end of the night. And that comes from a giant power position, and you can tell how big the hole is by the amount of alcohol that they're ordering, or the type of like party packages where you can order champagne, and you can have the girls come out and dress up as like ninjas or Pokemon or whatever little fantasy that they have. It is very interesting to watch.
What questions do you have for Jake? All right, I'll let you drive. And please introduce yourself.
Yeah, please.
Wait.
I'm sorry.
You could drive.
Okay, sorry. Okay. What role or position would you say has the most power within just Vegas, I would say, from your experience, and why?
I still think the hosts, the various hosts. So there's VIP hosts, which are hosts that book the tables particular to a club. They're contracted with a club. So like Omnia, there's an Omnia VIP host. Then there's independent VIP hosts, which I think is like the ultimate goal for most hosts, where you can book a table at any club. But you have to have you generally have the biggest network out of anybody. And then those are the ones who probably make the most money. And then the traditional host job that you have is called a casino host. And so you'll see some of the older generation, people generally in their like 60s and 70s, before clubs blew up, you had a casino host who basically set up an itinerary for a whale. A whale is generally somebody who has probably tens or hundreds of millions of dollars or more. They come in and they would set up an itinerary for you, whether it's like booking a show, booking your restaurants, booking the hotel room service. But now since the strip's become highly corporatized, that position's kind of been split up into a handful of individual ones. So, I mean, unless you have like some sort of high corporate job, like president or something, I would say the various levels of hosting is the most powerful position on the strip.
And do the hosts have carte blanche, or do they actually have to answer to senior management?
Yeah, so I'll use like the Omnia example. So you have VIP hosts. There's various managers that they have to answer to. There's the operations manager, you have the host manager, but they're the ones who are bringing the revenue in, so they get a lot more leeway. And if there's ever a confrontation between a host and the guest, it's generally the host that's receiving a lot of leeway versus the guests. Or if a host is in a confrontation with any other service industry member, they'll generally take the host over the cocktail server.
I had the opportunity to do a strip club tour in the fall of last year with some of the hosts. I won't name where they worked. We started at 12:15 on the night that the time changed, and I went to bed at 7:45, and we went to 3 clubs. And for me, it was probably one of the funnest nights I've ever had. And one of the hosts told me, he said, this was one of my top 3 Vegas nights, so that was quite a compliment. And we did not wait in line at any of the strip clubs. These guys go there all the time after work, for happy hour, for the food. It's where they decompress with their friends. And I just remember thinking, like, these are the guys that truly control the strip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, strip clubs are still, there's a reason why strip clubs aren't advertised as much as the clubs are, is because those are generally huge cash cows. There's a lot of leeway. I mean, I had a friend who is a taxi driver, and they get paid $50 per head per guy who walks into the club. That's way different than if you're a promoter that's outside a club who's slinging, those cards. Hey, come on the guest list for free. They're generally getting paid $3 to $5 per guy who walks in. So
That's
there's a reason
difference.
why there's a disparity, because the amount of money that's spent per guy who walks into a strip club.
I want to get to Oscar's question in a moment. I saw a billboard that I want your thoughts on. It said, I'm going to paraphrase it. I should have texted you. It said, due to Biden's forgiveness of student loans, there's a shortage of strippers. Please apply. What do you think about that?
It's probably true, honestly. It's probably the little darlings one are the funniest ones. Yeah, they always do grad night, right? So Little Darlings is known for this, where right after high school graduation they start putting advertisements up for recent graduates to come in and try out. So every strip club kind of has like their niche. Everyone kind of has a different one. To me, I think Spearmint Rhino is kind of like the highest quality one. That's what costs the most money. But the industry one is probably Crazy Horse 3.
We
but
went
there's
to
a handful
both.
of them. Yeah.
And then we ended up at Hustlers at 5:45 a.m. That's an experience that's once in a lifetime, is the sun's coming up and you're at Hustlers. Yeah.
Yeah, and they do terrace after hours now up there too, so they've turned part of that into a party atmosphere too.
Wow. Oscar, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to address how easy or difficult it is to actually take someone's power away from them based off of your personal skills and your strengths, such as if you're a host, this person's a VIP host, and I know just off my personality alone, I could draw more attention and bring more money, more off of me personally. So then, how easy for them to move you up to somewhere else because you're that man on the floor?
Yeah, so from a VIP host perspective, just to show you kind of like how much power they really have, they're the only position in a nightclub that has a non-compete that they have to sign. So if they are fired without probable cause, then they could go move to another nightclub. But if they're fired with some sort of cause or they leave on their own, then they generally have to wait anywhere from 6 months to 2 years, depending on the contract that they sign. That does not exist with any other position. So they don't want that money going to another nightclub because they know the hosts really have those relationships with those big whales. As server, I was just telling Payal as we were sitting and you guys were talking, a lot of servers generally move to other nightclubs or day clubs and have no issue. For a man, if you're a busser or a bartender, that's probably the best position you're going to get. And the opportunity to move to another nightclub generally doesn't exist as much as a female does or a woman. So a bunch of girls that I knew who worked at Omnia now all work over at Excess, and so those cocktail servers generally can be a little bit more aggressive in their strategy that they use to sell bottles, or if they're just partier and they want to drink at work or something like that, you kind of see them engage in that kind of behavior more because there are more opportunities that lie on the other side.
Well, I'm saying more, you said earlier what you basically make for the night bases off your section where you are. So that's what I'm saying. So such as my buddy and I both working at Omnia. He's been working there before me. He got me the job. Yet people are coming in based on my personality and saying, I want to be around him.
Okay.
I want him. I want him to bust our tables, be here because of the connections you build.
So you're saying from a service perspective, from a busser or a server, what kind of political power do they have because they're bringing guests or clients into them?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so the host would generally book tables based off of the guest's discretion, but there are a lot, we call them requests, and the managers were the ones that generally had to approve requests. The requests for the servers were generally always approved. The requests for the bussers were generally not approved because the bussers are more like a plug and play style, and the servers are the ones who are actually selling the bottle service to you. But you will get like whales or people who come in and they're like, I only want Jake. Jake makes me feel comfortable, right? He's a cool guy. But there's a few bussers who could play that, and so that generally only worked with dance floor tables. So at Omnia, there's 10 dance floor tables. On any given weekend, the tables are generally about $10,000 or more. So if you have somebody who's coming in and spend $10,000, you try to satisfy that. But if you have a guest who's coming in who's spending $2,000, which is definitely a lot of money, there's 50 tables that are $2,000. The management, generally will not approve that.
Our next question for you and your partner to answer, to what extent would you want to work at a nightclub here in town? Why or why not? All right, how many of you show up by a show of hands say absolutely not? How about a few of you that might say yes, you would want to work? Oscar, why? Let's start with you.
Well, I just mentioned like early on, just because it's just my personality. That's kind of how I make money now without being in the club. You know what I mean? Just throw my own event, stuff like that. So it'd be very easy for me. But eventually, I also, like you said, I don't come from the best place, so I'm very into financial education, literacy, and stuff like that. So I took my income and went and just got something that could make me money passively. So by the time I wanted to start my family, because I also want a family, I wouldn't have to be doing that. I could be doing other things and stuff as far as that. Just since I know it's a good way to make money in a fast amount of time.
Your response makes me think of the NFL, which I'm studying right now, and it took me a while in the project to understand why players, 70% are black, as you may know, would put themselves in a position where they're literally battering their bodies and their brains. And some of the executives have told me, they said, you have to think about access to resources and opportunities, and that not everyone was born, right, with the silver spoon in their mouth. And for a lot of these athletes, they've been socialized since they were children to pursue football, and this is literally all they know. And so I'm always appreciative when people like you share your stories, or as you have done, because it's important to understand why this is attractive and lucrative for people. And a lot of it is shaped by your background or the access you may have had to finances or not. So I hope you all can appreciate the broader context that goes into the decisions to work on the Strip.
Yeah, I mean, when you take that example and apply it to Nevada, it's one of the worst in education. It's been one of the worst in education every year I've been born here. So a lot of those people who work in the clubs, some of them don't have high school degrees. The majority of them don't have college degrees. So the access to capital here, like, right, that's a huge opportunity that doesn't exist in many other cities. And so,
yes.
So for them, they're happy to put on those golden handcuffs because they know this is the best opportunity, and they'll put their mind, body, and soul through this like depression because of the amount of capital that you can make.
I feel that that's an incredibly important point for people to understand. When I have family and friends who visit from out of town, I always have this conversation with them, because otherwise all they see is the glitz and the glam, right? But once you pull back the veil, which today's class is designed to do, you look at the Strip quite differently.
With this very like sarcastic phrase that everyone at the clubs always says, and be like, "How are you doing?" And everyone would say, "Living the dream." And it was like the most like sarcastic living the dream that anybody could say because of the things that you put your body through.
I had a former student who was a bartender at a strip club, and she would talk with me about how difficult it was for her to acclimate to corporate life, like in terms of nuances and expectations around behavior. She also told me that she had to go out and buy a whole new wardrobe, and she didn't know what to buy. Because obviously how you dress as a bartender in a strip club is so different than when you're working at Deloitte, right, in accounting. And I sent her this article about dirty work, which we'll talk about in our class in a few weeks. It's work that's morally, physically, or socially tainted. So prostitution as an example, or stripping as an example of dirty work. And the article I sent my former student is about the stickiness of dirty work. And it's the idea that phenomenologically, once you've been branded and like a prostitute or somebody who's a garbage collector or an abortion clinic doctor, it's really hard for that label to not haunt you and follow you through any future work in any other sector that you try to pursue. I'm curious for your thoughts on how sticky the stigma might be of working on the Strip if you try to leave and go work in a white collar job.
Yeah, I mean, the stickiness or the labeling of an industry job has definitely become less over time. I think that's kind of like the proliferation of OnlyFans and sexuality on social media is kind of hasn't tainted that position as much, and now it's actually like a more sought after position because the women who work in the club and the men, they're basically the influencers of Las Vegas, right? And the VIP hosts. So if you kind of attribute that, or you compare it to the influencers of California or LA, of Hollywood, that's kind of the same thing that's happening here. So that's why you see more people applying every year. That's why there's more people. There's more women at the day club auditions. There's more people trying to apply to be managers because there's a lot of social capital that now comes with it. And you do have some servers who move over to stripping after, or vice versa, strippers who move over to serving because. Yes, most strippers probably make more money than the bottle girls do at a club, but there's more social opportunity that comes with that.
Got it. I have one more question, but I saw a hand over here about the would you work in the nightlife industry or not? What was your response?
I think it's, for me at least, it's been painted as such an easy and good money job. And everyone just says like, oh, you get to party, you get to drink, and you make good money. So for me at least, it has been painted as like, oh, that's such a cool job to work at. You get to party and get good money and stuff. But now hearing this side of it, it's very much like, oh yeah, it's not just that. It's definitely, it comes at the price of a very toxic environment. So there's always two sides of it.
Yeah, it's definitely a young person's job for sure, and everyone's very, very aware of it. I had a very similar exit to what Oscar was speaking on. I just started investing very early, started buying cryptos, trying to create different jobs, opened 2 different businesses during that time. But as I was talking to Payal during the intermission, some people attempt to do this, right? You say, oh, I'm only going to do this for 2 or 3 years, right? Then I'm exiting because I don't want to end up like everyone else who's been here for 10, 15 years. And then you go start a business, then the business fails, so you're like, oh, now I have to make up that lost money. Or you go have a kid and you're like, okay, now I have to support my kid, right? Now I'm going to have to get them out of adolescence. And then by that time it's 7 or 8 years, and then you're 35, and then you're like, oh, well, there's no other opportunity after this, so I might as well just ride this through until the club closes or until I get fired. And that's where the golden handcuffs come. There's always like some sort of reason for never leaving, and everyone always talks about investing and buying things while you're there because you're making $500 to $2,000 a night. And you don't, because once you're off, you want to go hang out with those new clients that you met, right? That are your guests, or you want to go to the clubs with your coworkers, or you're trying to hook up with that person who you work with, or at a different club. And so then you make 500, then you go spend 500, and it just becomes this like perpetual cycle that never ends.
Wow. I see more questions.
When you say going out after work and connecting with your clients and coworkers, do you really want to, or is there a social responsibility to that where you feel like you have to maintain the relationship?
Yeah, there's definitely some sort of social responsibility. We could talk about it purely for connecting with your coworkers. From a busser's perspective, you're paired with a different server every night, so you're almost you have to nurture the relationship with the server because your tips are mostly dependent on her. At the nightclub, it's a pooled house, right? So the tips are split up. About 3/4 goes to servers, 1/4 goes to the busser. But any money that gets handed to the busser directly, you get to keep fully. And so the server gets handed thousands of dollars per night. So she could literally take half of it and just hand it to you based off of the relationship that you have. So if you have 70 different servers that are working there, that's 70 different relationships that could potentially make you thousands of dollars per night. So you're going to want to try to nurture that as best as possible. And the worst night ever is when you get paired with a server that you don't have a relationship with, or there's some sort of beef. There's even people that can't work with each other that the management has to abide by or make sure that it doesn't happen. So there's a lot of things that go on behind the scene that you want to nurture as well. And then from the client perspective, generally you have some servers who will go out with the guest or the client afterwards, because that could be a business relationship. That could be, of course, one of the rules is not to engage sexually with the clients. That obviously still happens. We're all human. Also, the idea of like sugar babies exists, and it's become more proliferated in Las Vegas. I think it has the highest. I think Vegas actually has the highest sugar baby to resident in Las Vegas. At one point when I was working, I think it was like 1 in 25 women have a sugar daddy of some sort in Las Vegas. And this is just actively talked about behind the scenes. And so the way that they could go about it, I'll use an example once. We had 2 servers who were serving a guest. The guest spent in the 6-figure range. He left, they left with him, they took half a point. They ended up going to play craps. He gave them, and this happens a lot, where a guest will bring girls with them, he'll give them money to gamble with, and then the idea is that if you win money, then you just pay me what I gave you. If you lose money, then it's gone. The girls ended up winning like $200,000 each, and so that night just turned from a $2,000 night to a $200,000 night. So there's a lot of extracurricular things that can happen as well that people balance with, and then obviously if you're doing this every night, then you have you suffer health implications because you're engaging with substance abuse, alcohol abuse, and all these other things.
$200,000. How many people in this room do not need $200,000? That'd be my mortgage.
Yeah, it's
In one night.
in one night. Yeah, in one night. And then obviously, of course, that goes under the table. Of course, you have to report some of it, but these guys that you go gamble with are billionaires, so they probably cover the taxes. And there's there's a lot of things that go unsaid too, or not spoken about, where similar things can happen.
To the earlier comment about how the conversation helps you see the different sides to working on the strip, when I hear about the statistic of sugar baby, my question, because I study masculinity, is who are the dudes? And like, why are they okay with this lifestyle, right? It's a supply and demand issue on both sides. Why don't you take a moment and chat through with your partner, how do you feel about the idea of a sugar daddy or a sugar baby? Let's see where you land. Okay, this was, I'm sure, the question you woke up this morning thinking you'd answer in power class. What are your thoughts on the sugar baby, sugar daddy phenomena? And I'll let you drive, Jake.
Good.
I think it's more, I was talking more about like power dynamics, I think. Like I think both sides can have power in either way, shape, or form. And so I think it's really just an interesting topic in itself.
How does let's start with, this is fascinating. Let's start with the sugar, let's say it's a woman. How does the woman have power? Let's start with that, in your opinion.
I think she would have power in the sense of like kind of deciding what she gets to do with the money. And if the man, I guess in this case, really wants a companion, she can like leverage that and be like, hey, like, if you want to continue to do this, like I want more money from you, I want to do more, like, or whatever it is. And have that power in that way to really decide like what the man gets to give up or do.
And so it sounds like she has agency to decide what she does with the money. Power, as you know, is about a relationship, right? So we can't have power individually. It's always a function of the other party. She can have control and influence over the man in terms of setting a rate or asking for a certain amount of money, which would be a resource to then use as she so chooses. What do you think?
Yeah, I think now, even more today than ever, because of OnlyFans and these other ways that sugar babies can now not have to are not forced to have sexual relations, but can take that kind of same idea and then move it to a digital economy. Some of these girls on OnlyFans are making $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month. And they don't have to do anything, right? Maybe show us a few nudes, where a lot of the traditional sugar babies generally engage in like sexual relationships. They have even more power today, I think.
I saw a couple of hands right here and here, and then we'll go to Oscar.
When we were talking about the women powers, I was just thinking about how like sometimes the dudes like they want to be like disrespected, like they pay to get disrespected, like that's what they like.
Right? Maybe right? Maybe the man is a multimillionaire and just basically bosses people around all day, and so he's never had somebody to return the favor.
Like a shaming king.
Have these people not considered therapy? That'd be a lot cheaper, right? It's just mind blowing.
Like,
I remember
called like pay pigs, whatever. Like
somebody, and I'm trying to remember who. Somebody told me. I know what it was. Somebody asked me my opinion about strip clubs, and I have a lot of opinions about this, and I went to one before I moved here for my rap music project. But I remember I read an article that talked about why men patron strip clubs. Can any of you guess what the number one reason is? It's not sex or sexually driven. Yeah.
Companionship.
Yes.
Somebody to talk to.
Exactly. And it's also why, by the way, men visit brothels. That's the number one reason, according to the research. So this is not anecdotal. It's actually based on academics who have gone into brothels and spent time there and talked to customers and the providers alike. Does that surprise you that it's about companionship?
Yeah, I had a woman on a podcast named Riley Rabbit. She lived at Bunny Ranch for some months, and she talks about oftentimes men would come in and pay her, and she never had to have sex with them inside of a brothel on the bed. They just wanted to be heard because they're having relationship issues with their spouse or partner.
My co-author Christy on the Video Model Project, when we talked about this topic, she pointed out, and of course we have PhDs, so we think about this all the time. She was like, these women are not credentialed to talk about relationship problems, right? Like Christy was like, why don't they go to a clinical psychologist? And I was like, there's probably a lot of reasons why people go to a brothel instead of
It's probably about the same price,
psychology.
right?
Or cheaper to go to a credentialed provider that can help you. And then did you have a comment, Malcolm?
Yeah, so I was going to make a comment that I think that is why they engage in that type of, those types of relationships, is because, kind of like what you were saying, these people are in positional powers or whatever that have given them a lot of money, and so most of the time people are going to walk around eggshells, or they can't form a genuine connection with a lot of different people. I think it's also an example of, like, even while we were standing in line at Starbucks, you know, you look around and people are on their phones, and I'm not
Everyone.
saying that I'm exempt from that. I'm also on my phone, but it's hard to form a connection with just about anybody. It's not a coincidental thing. So, for instance, these people on OnlyFans, what you're doing is establishing a connection with somebody who you can have a conversation, even if it's just something as simple like, you know, they do these packages or whatever where, like, you know, you can pay for, what is it, like a girlfriend experience or whatever, and, like, you have somebody to text, and, like, people will pay for that experience because they want to know that they can have a communication with somebody who cares, even if it's just a fake caring. But I think a lot of times it's kind of a weird coexistence where there's money exchanged, but there's like something of a connection, and it's above a sexual thing at this point. It's like there's just a lot of isolation in today's environment because of the technology. And so people are willing to pay if it means forming a connection regardless of its authenticity or the motives behind the other person.
All right, I have a lot of opinions, so I want to know what you think as well. When we were in line for Starbucks, every single person was on their phone. No, we were chatting, and then I was waiting for Jake, but literally everyone was on their device. It's so funny because when I went to the strip club for my video model project, you'll hear this when I present the research in a little bit, there's a lot of overlap between hip hop and the strip club environment. And somebody asked me later what I thought of it, and I said, it's transactional. This is what people somehow fail to really internalize, and the research suggests that as well, that people fundamentally are engaging in a transaction to create intimacy.
Yeah, it's very true. It's the crazy thing with like OnlyFans now is that you have a lot of agencies who manage the women's account, so they're not even engaging in conversation with the woman, but it's perceived, right? It's all about perception at this time, and I think that's what exists also with the nightclub as well. And I just went on a show recently. We're talking about can the woke culture change Vegas, and can woke culture change
woke
Vegas?
Culture,
right? Because I discuss this a lot about how women are the ones who are in control on the strip, and it's not the men. Yes, you have the VIP hosts who control the flow of money, but the flow of traffic is dependent on the women. If all the women disappeared, nobody would come, right? Because it's all the men who are paying for it. So with woke culture, and depending on whatever your views are on it, they're discussing of how, like, women control my tips, right? It's the complete opposite of how traditionally in society men control women's tips. And so there's that double standard in play that no one really discusses. And we're discussing the idea of, like, will that ever change? Will it ever be where the busser and the server can choose how the tips are dispersed? And my opinion is no, and it's only going to, and the divide or the dependency of women's sexuality and how you monetize it is only going to grow bigger over time because of how the digital economy is kind of severing that traditional relationship between people in an in-person type of situation.
That is power, and it is interesting because men typically have power, but here the men are in a lower hierarchical position as bussers to the women who are cocktail servers and making more money and controlling the money as a resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a very interesting conversation, and again, now I use OnlyFans as an example, but there's a lot of other platforms as well. There's more opportunity now for women to showcase their sexuality and then to use that as power and direct it in whatever form that they want. I mean, when you use Kim Kardashian as an example, right? She became famous because she put out a sex tape, but now she's a multi-billionaire in that family because they use their sexuality to get to where they are. But now they don't have to use it as much.
Oh, that makes sense. So early on in your career, you might have to leverage it until you move into entrepreneurial roles.
Mm-hmm. And you'll probably see this on the strip over time as well. So maybe those golden handcuffs can change because of how technology allows you to use that now, that audience, right? A lot of the women that I worked with are getting 10,000 to 100,000 followers because of they're the woman who's going to take care of you at the nightclub, and they're making a lot of money. But now there's more opportunity than, let's say, 20 years ago, where you basically age out and that's the end. And now there's, if you're smart and you use your entrepreneurial mindset to take that audience and then build something else, that exists.
And that, to me, is the interesting part, is who has the entrepreneurial mindset and will leverage what they're building on the strip in terms of relational capital. I have to say, the hosts that I've hung out with, they do take good care of you. I mean, you really feel like they're there to make sure that you feel comfortable, and I know that's a sales kind of approach, but I have felt that very much so. I was telling Jake that I went to The Weeknd, the concert, a few weeks ago. I was at Allegiant Stadium way too much at one point, and my phone battery died, so I walked to Mandalay because I know some of the hosts at Foundation Room, and I walked up, they're like, "Hey, professor." And I asked them if they would charge my phone, and my college best friend, he lives in Austin, he said only you would go to the Foundation Room for tech support. But I did. I needed my phone to be charged, and the guys kept saying, "Do you want like a drink? Here's a drink ticket, you can go upstairs." And I was like, "Guys, it's 12:15, I'm tired, I just need to get enough juice in my phone to take Uber," and with the people I was with, and they were laughing. They were like, "Okay," they're like, "Are you sure you don't want to have a glass of champagne?" I'm like, "No, I'm here to get my phone charged, and then I'm done." So I don't know where you go to charge your phone, but I go to the Foundation Room. Yeah.
Right. It's like an idea of situational power. And you realize this even in the nightclubs as well. As a busser, you get a lot of like random requests. You get guests asking you for dice or for cards or to go break bills, or I had somebody tip me $500 to go get him root beer because we didn't have it in the nightclub. And so you start seeing like the need and some of these like small nuanced requests that people will pay for. And it's again it's extrapolated in the nightclub, and maybe just because there's more money, so there's a more premium. But that was something that I think about a lot, is why would somebody pay me $100 to go get them a pair of dice where they're not going to use in the nightclub? They're probably thinking ahead of that they're going to need it later for something.
Only in Las Vegas would you pay $500 for root beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have more questions. I'll let you drive. And why don't we start with Oscar, actually, and then we'll go across the room.
So it's funny that you just mentioned it, 'cause I wanted to tag on to when you guys were talking about the sugar mamas and sugar daddies, because women spend money on things as well, so it's not just. But I was addressing, you guys said that the women had the agency in it, and I was going to address just being around these certain men, because I had a question for you earlier, my mind kind of just goes. I believe that the men and the women that are actually spending the money have the agency. Why? Because as I was addressing to her, they're in. When I talk to these people, right, so they, like you're saying, they do these specific tasks because they value time. So you find people that value time more than anything else. They're in a different lifestyle where that's nothing to them. So they don't even care. So that's something that's, they may even have a husband and a wife, and they both understand that they both live this lifestyle. They won't leave each other, they're happy together. They go back home, they go out and do the same stuff, and they know that this time is where I don't disrespect my wife. I have this amount of time to do this. Come back home, and we are happy. So that's why I said it's not even an issue. They don't even pay nothing to it, while the one or the person that is trying to get the money, thinking that they're the one that's actually has the agency, the main person is actually using them because it's helping them live the lifestyle that's their lifestyle. And you know what I mean? That's why I say to a lot of people, how can you address from someone's perspective when they might not wipe their butt with the same stuff that we wipe our butt with, you know what I mean? Like they live different, they're taught something different from just the class that they're in now.
You're spot on. That's the upper class values time more than anything. That's why they have maids. That's why they have drivers. That's why Snoop Dogg has a blunt roller, right? Like, there's all these like small nuanced positions that pop up because they'd rather be talking with their wife or on the phone negotiating a multi-billion-dollar deal. There's so many different things that are particular to everyone's life, and that's a very novel idea.
Alyssa.
Okay, so I think there's like definitely power on like both sides when you're in a nightclub. Like as the like server, like the people, like you could do anything and they'll just throw money at you. Like you can like accept like a lot of a lot of like tasks or something, and then they're the ones giving you money because you have that power, like they're giving you like that money of their own free will. And like it just depends on like how charming or like how good you are or like how like nice you are to them, because when you're the one getting the money, you're the one getting the tips, so you're like making that, and like I guess getting, like as you said, like you're getting more than like the average person, so you have that power because like you can get them whatever they want whenever you want, and they just give money to you. At the same time, like on the other end, it's also they give you like they have all that money to give to you, and
Yes.
you have to do whatever they want. Like as you said, like people like dressing up or like having specific servers or whatever, like that's that's power on both sides. And I think like that's also why it makes it so hard to leave, because like you get so much money from those people that like $500 for root beer is insane. It's like a crazy thing. Like why would you want to leave that when you're getting like $500 for like these, I guess like these menial tasks that exist? So it's, I guess like I can see like why it's so hard for people to leave, because like why would you give that up when you can like earn so much money rather than like a lower paying job, like a serving job, regardless of like what kind of behavior like comes out of the nightclub jobs.
Yeah, as bussers, at the end of the night, we had a tip team, and they would put down like the average hourly income for it. And we used to have these accolades where it's like, oh, we're making doctor money tonight, or oh, we're making basketball player money tonight, or we had these like different comparisons that we use, and we're all aware of like how ludicrous and crazy it is to like be changing juice and ice and making like the amount of money that somebody who went through 15 years of schooling is doing. Yeah, it's insane.
Yes.
I'm Tatiana, by the way. But it's just crazy hearing like this side of the strip, because it's like I work guest services at a hotel on the strip, and I think like the whole club thing does not help the mentality of people, because it's like everybody comes to the strip and they think that they're going to be treated the way like these people are treated. So it's like I get these menial tasks all the time, and I'm literally just a person answering the phone, so I can't carry out these meaningful tasks. Like I just like transfer them somewhere. But it's crazy, honestly, dealing with these guests like all the time. Like I have to try to track down casino hosts because one of their guests is like not having a good time. So I have to try to like find their number, figure out like where their office is at, and call them and be like, can you like help your person, because they're like calling me and I don't know how to help them. So I just think it's so crazy. But like, have you ever worked like the hotel side of it, or have you only ever worked the club side of it?
So I did 5 years at the nightclub, which was like an actual industry job, and then I did 5 years at a pool, which was started as a lifeguard, then to lead reception, cabana house. So I've always kind of been on that like party side. So those were the only two jobs that I had on the strip for 10 years.
It's crazy the differences, honestly.
And the expectations, right, that guests have of people in your roles that they carry over from the night or day clubs.
It is. Like it's honestly crazy seeing how much like MGM will do for these VIP people, and like they'll do like some crazy things that like a normal guest would like get kicked out of the hotel for, but they won't kick them out because they spend so much money.
Yeah,
I always,
so the highest paying table that we ever had was over $1 million. The guest helicoptered in to the top of Caesar's Palace he was like with a bunch of sports players, and they blocked off half of the nightclub tables, and they built this like high-level nightclub table that had like pool, like little kiddie pools and stripper poles and like these like money machines. Is insane. But they literally helicoptered him in, and they hadn't used the heliport in like years. So they had to get like all those like zoning requirements for him to happen. He showed up with Drake at the same time in the helicopter. So depending on the amount of money that you're spending, they'll go through whatever length that they can to make sure that you spend the money there.
And then they make us call the VIP guests. Like if they're staying like a certain amount of days, we have to call them and like make sure they're having like a good stay.
And imagine if that becomes your normal, right? Helicoptering in, having unrealistic expectations. Think about what we've talked about, how power affects your emotions, your thoughts, and your behavior. You start to develop myopia, and you don't live in reality because you don't have to.
We had this sheik who would come in. I forget what country he was from. he had 3 hookah guys, and he'd bring a hookah in. We never had, this is the only time we ever had hookah in the nightclub. Obviously it's a fire hazard. So he'd have to bring in 3 people, again, they'd have to do some sort of like licensing thing, to manage the hookah in such a way that when they had to take pulls, they had to have 3 people around it at all times in a certain area, but in the basement next to the guys' locker room where they would change it, and it was only for this guest because he'd come in and spend so much money.
Imagine that's on your LinkedIn. Your job description is
The hookah guy?
Yeah.
You could change it for a chic?
Yeah.
Changing out the code.
But people are. I saw a hand here, and then Malia.
So in a, atmosphere that, I guess it doesn't sound like you have much free time outside of work. And also I feel like a lot of the relationships are kind of like falsely built. Like you want to have, want to be on the server's good side, the VIP host good side, and like, I don't know where like, the trust and whatnot is built. Like where did you find like true friendships at if you didn't really have enough time outside of work to build those in other places, and like all you had really was work?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely, I guess it depends how you want to spend your time. When I worked at the nightclub, I was working 3 or 4 days a week, so you're working 20, 30 hours, so it's really not that much. You're just paying for it on the backside because you're developing insomnia, so you're always feeling tired and lethargic. You have to go to the doctor more often, you're getting sick more often. Yes, there is a lot of false relationships. That's why, and I identified that very quickly. There's a phrase that's called "you're so industry," and that's kind of speaking to that idea that if you're very industry, you're realizing, most people who are outside are realizing that you're in this fictitious world. There's a lot of servers and bussers and VIP hosts who build these huge egos, and they definitely talk down to people condescendingly, and they're very aggressive and demeaning. But outside of the strip, they're nobodies, right? Like you're just a girl who serves bottles to rich people, and that's why some of them don't ever leave the strip, and they probably put more time and effort into nurturing these fake relationships, and some of them are real too, is because they don't want to face that reality that outside of the strip, they're nobody. But inside of the strip, inside of this fairy tale world, or what did you call it? What was something like a false reality? They're a hotshot.
They're somebody. Yeah, because who wants to face the reality that society will judge you, right, for the work that you're doing? You can stay inside your bubble and feel revered. Malia?
I actually have a question about like maybe upper management. Like, is that lifestyle just as detrimental? I mean, like, because there has to be like a business side to the club, and so what is the business side of the club?
I would say it's worse, honestly. The managers are working probably like 80 hours a week, 90 hours. They have to be there at 6 p.m. They leave at 6 a.m. They're there 5 days a week, so you're working 5/12s. You're not, and also as a lower man, or if you just say like entry-level operations manager, you're not making. The bussers and the servers and bartenders are making more than you, but it's once you get past that, once you start getting to assistant manager, then you're making 6 figures, and then like the ops manager, or if you're like the club manager, you're probably making 200, 250,000, and then if you keep working your way up, it becomes even more lucrative. But from the business side, to me, we had more turnover for managers than any other position in the club. I was there for 5 years, and I probably had about 30 or 40 different busing managers. Wow. And a lot of these guys are, and I say guys because I think I only had 2 women operation managers the entire time I was there. These guys are balding by 30, they're drinking 3-4 Red Bulls a day, right, developing very bad habits. But it's because a lot of these guys too, who are older, they found that they were ending their career in busing and bartending, but they want to stay in the industry. So you move from making, say you're a bartender, let's say you move from making 100K a year to making 70 or 80K a year. Now you have a little bit more power, but now you don't have to go through the service aspect and being judged based off of your looks. And as a manager, you could kind of just continually ride the power, but stay in the industry. So I refused to be a manager the entire time. I've seen what it's done to people. It was the same when I worked at Planet Hollywood as well, from the management perspective. They really, really grind you because you're a salary employee and not a tipped employee, so you're not protected by the union as well. And they can kind of like use you and abuse you as they will.
Right here.
I want to go back to like how you're talking about how most people who do work in the industry, like most of the time they're like no one once they leave the strip. but I just have like a lot of industry friends that I've just made out here and stuff. But like I feel like half of them are either like parents, so they work till like 5 in the morning and then they stay up till 7 because they have to get their kids ready and then drop them off at school. And then while their kid goes to school, they catch up on sleep and then go back to pick up their kid and then go back to work. And then the other aspect is if they are single or they're in a relationship, whether it is, like I have a lot of friends who are like cosmetologists or real estate agents, or they have multiple businesses. And I think that's going back to how you said, if you're using all of that to leverage to like build into your actual goal, then I can understand why a lot of people stay, whether it's unhealthy or not.
Yeah, it's a means to an end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking with Payal during one of the intermissions that some people like the night shift. It just satisfies their lifestyle a little bit better, especially for kids. That is common because they have to take their kids to school at like 7 a.m. or something like that. So you get off at 5:30, you wait around, then you go take your kid, then you go to bed and come back. So that is true. It's just unfortunate that what you're speaking to is just a small fraction of the people that actually exist. So for me, when I was working there for 5 years, I was investing and I tried to build 2 different businesses at the time. Unfortunately, they didn't work and satisfy, but I was just a small minority of people who were trying to build something, because you get caught up in the lifestyle of going out and choosing to nurture those relationships to then stay in that perpetual cycle versus trying to break out of it, even though most people have the intention of saying like, this is my last year, this is my last year, right? This is my last year. But I heard everyone say that consistently. But some people do choose to go back to school. Some people do cosmetology, and there are people who build other businesses outside of it. It's just, even when that's happened, I had a few friends who became cosmetologists. They still work in the industry and they do hair as well, because maybe they're trying to build up enough capital to safely leave. It's just making that leap of faith from the golden handcuffs to actual society, even though it is both society, but we'll just say to a traditional job. For some people, that comfortability varies. I had a friend who I ran into last night working at a foundation room. She quit Omnia as she was getting her real estate license. And then after 3-4 months, realized she didn't like real estate. And now she's taking like a 60-70% pay cut working at this new job, right? Because she wasn't prepared, but she wanted to get out. So that leap, it varies depending on the person.
Fascinating. Did I see a hand over here?
Well, I work at a hotel too. I work at the front desk, and like all the front desk agents, they make way more than the managers because they make commission off the rooms. And like some people that come in, they got like a lot of money because it's the ARIA and stuff, and they'll spend like whatever on a room, and then the managers, the only thing that they had to deal with like all the problems. But they gave up all their money that they were making doing commission tips and all that so they can get more power. And that just reminded me a lot about that in the nightclub. It feels like all the hotel, nightclub, everything on the strip, they all, like, you don't make as much as a manager, but you have to do it so that way you can get to the next position.
Yeah, that's what they say, all right? Entry-level management, you definitely take a pay cut, but once you get to middle and upper, then you're making more than what the service employee is making. It's just sometimes from moving to entry-level to middle, it could take years or decades, because you're basically waiting on somebody to get fired or quit.
And then you can step in. Our final question from Sean.
So it's more just a comment, but I find it interesting the point of views of growing up in Vegas versus people who come here and they're already like 21 years old. Because I feel like growing up in Vegas, a lot of people are normalized to start working on the strip as a lifeguard, go to the server, then go to the clubs, day clubs, pool clubs, nightclubs. And it just becomes a normalized thing. Because like even my cousin's going through that issue of she started out as a lifeguard. And then she is working to be a cocktail server. But she already has a degree, and she's actually working on her master's degree in nursing. But she works 2 jobs at a hospital and still at the pool. And so she's like,
wow.
Well, I make so much more money at the hotels, and I'm not making anything as a nurse yet. And so it's just weird how it's normalized. Like, a lot of kids who do grow up in Vegas they're already just like pushed to the strip. Start off as lifeguards and then they just stay in the industry.
Yeah, lifeguard's the ultimate entry position. It's crazy. So when I worked at Planet Hollywood, the president of Planet Hollywood started off as a lifeguard as well. The casinos always, they prefer to promote internally than hire externally, even from an executive level position, because the strip is based off of experience, right? If you can have that customer service relationship and business operations, then that's going to do better than any college degree. And I also graduated with a college degree from here, and I never used it professionally, more practically, with a kinesiology degree because of just staying on the strip and realizing that there's more opportunity out there that and making more money through the relationships or through the experience than using a kinesiology degree to be a physical therapist.
Closing thoughts for the students on power.
It exists pretty hard on the strip. I don't want to, even though there's negative views and I'm telling you about the other side, I had a blast at Omnia, right? I worked there for 5 years and then 5 years at the pool. It was a very, very fun time. To me, it just came down to a decision of like, what do I prefer more? Do I prefer quality of life, or do I just want to have like a large personal treasury? And I realized that even though I always wanted quality of life, and I was trying to save money, I was also spending it. But once I took that leap of faith and was making about the same or less, my quality of life improved, and I was dramatically healthier, happier, and motivated to pursue things. And to me, I think it was just more from the health effects that it was weighing on me. The insomnia was killing me inside. I could not do it anymore. But for a lot of friends that I still have working there, even about almost 10 years now after since it's opened, they're still happy, right? They're still doing it and making money. It's just I was more motivated to do other things in life than working on the strip. But if you're young and you want to make a lot of money, I highly advise doing it. Just make sure you set some goals and some boundaries on yourself, because you will get pushed through those boundaries, right? Whether it's through substance abuse or extracurricular activities or partying. Just know where those boundaries lie, and that if you want to be there for 4 or 5 years, or you want to make X amount of money, make sure you set those and you define those goals before you go in.
Where can students find you if they want to stay in touch?
You can find me on social media, podcast, Twitter, just at Jake Gallen. I have that handle for everything. Feel free to reach out to me. Any questions on the strip? I also host a lot of like Vegas entrepreneur meetups. I spend all my time now in crypto, so if you have any crypto questions, you can ask me that, and NFTs as well.
Please join me in thanking Jake for his time this morning.